So I just want to invite you all to give a brief 1-minute introduction of your organization. Tell us a little bit about your organization and why this work is so important to you. And we will start with Dr. Irwin.
All right, hello. So is it 1 minute or 10 minutes? Because
yes, yes. So this one is just 1 minute. This is just gonna be a brief introduction of your organization, just a little introduction of your organization and why this work is important to you. And then we'll move into our 10-minute.
Okay, all right, I'm just making sure. Yes, so I'm Sonia Irwin. I'm one of the co-founders of One Community, which is dedicated to raising awareness, acceptance, and involvement of all members of our community. We hear a lot about diversity, but we don't really connect necessarily. There are diverse people, but we don't have the relationships. And that's building the relationships and understanding so that we can have the empathy and the understanding and have a stronger community is what One Community is all about.
Thank you so much, Dr. Irwin. I'm going to pass it over to Deanna.
Thanks, Mickey. My name is Deanna Filkins. I am the Executive Director of Glen Ellyn Youth and Family Counseling Service. We are a local nonprofit in Glen Ellyn that provides reduced fee and free mental health services and counseling to all residents of Glen Ellyn and those who may have a child within school district boundaries. Our nonprofit started locally by parents and school staff that saw a need to reduce access barriers for mental health, especially for lower income families that might not have access to insurance resources. So we are all about diversity, all about inclusion. That's how our mission started in this community, and really happy to be here. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Deanna. I am going to pass it over to Leah.
Hi, I am excited to be here today. I'm representing Glen Ellyn Children's Resource Center, or GCRC, or the Resource Center. It kind of depends on when you joined our community over the years of what you call it. But all in, we are a dedicated nonprofit in Glen Ellyn for nearly 20 years, which I'm feeling pretty proud about. We started as a small tutoring program at the Parkside Apartments and then moved to Faith Lutheran Church. And we've now evolved into an organization with 4 after-school programs in D41 and D89, as well as a robust summer program. So we are committed to improving the academic and social opportunities for students in our community.
Thanks so much, Leah. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jamie.
Sorry about that. My name is Jamie Lafontaine Dougherty. I am the administrator, one of the administrators for the Glen Ellyn Allies for Racial Justice Facebook group. So we're a little bit different. We're not exactly an organization, but I'll talk more about that later. The mission statement of this Facebook group is a commitment to the ongoing transformative conversations and collaborations required for racial justice in our communities. We invite conversations, share resources that help to further this goal. And as I said, we'll talk more about that later. So thank you, and we're excited to be here.
Sounds so cool. Can't wait to hear more about it, Jamie. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Janine.
Hi, thank you. My name is Janine Woltman. I'm the coordinator of the Glenbard Early Childhood Collaborative. And the Glenbard ECC is about 4.5 years old, and it was formed really with the goal of supporting our youngest learners, children really prenatally to age 5, but in recognizing that, knowing that we need to also be supporting the families. We support Glen Ellyn District 41 and 89, and then also a few other surrounding districts, 2 in Glendale Heights and 1 in Lombard, that all feed into the Glenbard High School District. But really we were kind of founded knowing that there are so many supports out there for families, but that there's disparities in who's able to access those. And we really wanted to bridge those gaps.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
I don't know, it's okay.
You're good.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much for sharing, Janine. I'm going to pass the mic over to Rob.
Great, thank you, Janine. I appreciate the opportunity to join everybody today. My name is Rob Wilkinson. I'm the CEO of the Ryall YMCA. I've been the CEO for the past 2 years, but prior I've been with the movement, YMCA movement, for over 30 years. The Ryall YMCA is fortunate to have recently celebrated 100 years of service to the Wheaton and Glen Ellyn communities, providing services and programs for youth, families, and seniors that focus on youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. And I'll go into a little more detail during my presentation, but thanks for letting us be here today.
Thank you so much for sharing, Rob. Looking forward to hearing from you. And last but certainly not least, Clara.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. My name is Clara Hughes, and I'm a resident of Glen Ellyn. I'm also a member of First Congregational Church, and we are members of DuPage United, which is a social justice action group made up of a variety of various faith institutions and nonprofit leaders, and we gather together to be a voice for those who do not have a voice. So it's very important work within our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clara. And I do definitely want to extend a thanks and a quick introduction to Don Bussey, who is from the Glen Ellyn Public Library. Don, thank you so much for working so hard to put this amazing day together. Just looking forward to all of the things we're going to continue to learn and all of the things we have learned from engaging in these conversations across the board. So at this point, I want to transition over into our program for today. Our program for today is going to be 7 to 10 minute talks from each of our panelists, who will take some time to share some insight with us all into their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts within their organization. So I know many of you have already prepared something, but I do want to note that you are welcome to share what you have been up to as an organization, any challenges or obstacles that you have been experiencing or faced, or where you are headed in the future. And to our community participants that are listening in today, I definitely want to invite you to come to this conversation from a place of compassion, from a place of curiosity, and also from a place of grace as we hear from each of our panelists today. I want to encourage each of you all to recognize that while many of us are not at the end of this work, we are also not at the beginning. So if we're not at the end and we're not at the beginning, then that means we are in the middle, right? And as a Black woman who wakes up every day in my skin, preparing to do this work, there are still things that I am learning, right? Still things and challenges that I am facing. And I want us to come to this conversation today from that place and just think about, come to the conversation today from that place, recognizing that we are in the middle and there is still work to be done. And that today is an opportunity for each of us to get curious about the ways in which these organizations are doing their work, to glean into their efforts, and to think together collectively about how we are going to continue to do this work. I do want to note that there will be some opportunity for Q&A from the community at the end of these talks today. You are welcome to utilize the chat function as well as the question feature. And I know that in our last session, Panelists, you're welcome. If you see that a community participant is directing a question straight to you after you've finished your talk, you are more than welcome to answer some of those questions, though we do want to answer some of those questions in the chat, though we do want to make sure that we are present to each other's talks today. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and begin our conversation today. I want to do that by getting us started and passing the mic over to, everyone's like, who's gonna go first? Who's gonna go first? Not me, not me. I'm gonna get us started today by passing the mic over to Leah Harding. Leah, take it away.
Okay, I get to go first. Kind of what I said in my brief intro, that we're an after-school tutoring and mentorship program that's been in our community for nearly 20 years. And I mentioned that we are here to help provide academic and social opportunities for kids in our community. And so what that looks like for GCRC, at an organizational level, we began intentional DEI consulting work in July with Pendulum Consulting. They're based out of Indiana. And during the course of our time together since July, we've conducted we've held DEI trainings for our board. We've held trainings with our board and our staff to strengthen the relationship between board and staff. And out of that work we've created an accountability task force that is mixed between board and staff members and has the task of continuing the DEI conversation and work. And as you know, it's so important to the integrity of the work that we do, that we continue along this path, pursue it with open minds and open hearts. So that's kind of what we're doing organizationally. We are also working to assure that our norms align with our values. And so what that means for us over, the past year and kind of highlighted by the circumstances surrounding COVID and the impact that it's had on our families, our community, our schools, is that we've kind of begun a reflection period, right? So we've been looking back as we near our 20th anniversary. We're looking back, like why did we start? What have we been doing? Who were we? Where are we headed into 2021? And that's been a really important and interesting process to begin. We have committed to a willingness on our board and amongst our staff to have difficult and complicated conversations as we learn about how to communicate the shifts that might be needed in our culture to ensure that can lead to bias and exclusion. So we want to talk about those things, work to eliminate any things that may reflect those concerns, and talking about the power of words, right? We are a literacy nonprofit. We are striving to help students gain literacy skills and academic attainment and confidence. So words matter, and the words that we use to describe our organization, the words we use to describe our students, their families, the community at large matter. And so we're taking kind of a deep dive into the words and ways we talk about ourselves and our organization so that we can be better, do better, and be set up for success as we head into our next chapter. So that's our organizational piece. I would say that the heart of GECRC, though, is our interpersonal connections and individual relationships. So anybody who knows us knows that we are a tutoring program. So we have tutors from all ages, high school up through retirement age, that come in daily to work with our students. And so our kids one day will have a high school student as their tutor, which has been really helpful during the time of COVID, because our high schoolers can say, hey, I know about this tech shortcut to help with the document for the homework. That's been really awesome to have that. And the kids love having high schoolers. And then the next day, perhaps they'll have someone who is of a parent age, and that brings a different type of support and comfort. And then the next day, they'll have someone who's maybe older and kind of fits into like a grandparent type role, where they can listen or share stories of their educational experience. So our kids are getting a wide variety of relationship building across age spectrum, race, religion, socioeconomic status. So that's really kind of the heart of our program, is how our kids interact with our staff and how our kids build relationships with their tutors. So we've really been intentional about building that tutor-student relationship into a mutual relationship, right? So it's not simply, hi, I'm your tutor, I'm here to help you. It's, hi, I'm your tutor, we're here to get to know each other, learn of our differences, find commonalities, build a relationship, a friendship that goes beyond helping with independent reading or helping with the math homework, right? So it's those relationships that are at the heart of all this work. Like, that's what needs to be done in order for any of these other things to kind of have impact. So our tutor-student relationship is key. Our staff and student relationship is key, especially during COVID. Our staff members have they'll be on their Google Classrooms, and they will leave their screen up a little bit after a program where kids can stay and chat and catch up with them. So just having that constant daily support is so critical to the success of our program, the community building that is happening, and just kind of the way we're running. So, and then along with that, interpersonal relationship piece is listening, right? So the key for us has also been, especially this year, especially highlighted during COVID when we had to kind of revamp our program overnight, was listening to our students, to their parents, their families, what they needed in this time, right? I can have great ideas about how to help you, but that may not be what you need. So listening is key. So we're listening to our kids and their families. We're listening to the teachers and the principals and the school administrators that we work with, what the needs are in the school, and supporting them and being a partner to them. And then we're listening to our tutors and our community members and how they feel that they can help and contribute. So we strive to be a uniting organization that brings people from all walks of life together to improve our community. And I think I got all my points out in under the time.
Thank you so much, Leah, for sharing some insight into your organization and what you all are doing. It's great to hear that, you all are finding ways to build relationships across differences, because we know that that is one of the core aspects of the work towards achieving equity for all. So thank you so much, Leah. Okay, so next we are going to go ahead and pass the mic to Deanna Wilkins. Deanna, you ready to go?
Ready. Hi, everyone. All right. Thanks, Leah, for opening that up. You were great. It's going to be hard to follow you. So as I said before, my name is Deanna Wilkins. I'm the Executive Director of Glen Ellyn Youth and Family Counseling Service. We are a local nonprofit mental health agency that began, like I said, 42 years ago now, out of requests from parents and local community members, just needing more access for kids, especially in families that might be low income and need access to mental health resources without insurance. In terms of, where we started and where we've always kind of been around diversity, mental health does not discriminate. It's across every ethnicity, gender, cultural, all of it. So in that sense, we stay true to our mission and our goals. We have, from birth up to, you know, our geriatric population, our elderly population that come in for our services. Although we do get most of our referrals from our local school districts, we primarily work with, you know, that 0 to 18 range. We also, you know, work with a lot of families that may have intergenerational living circumstances. They might be the primary guardians in terms of grandparents or someone else in the family. So we take all of that into consideration. And I think one of the things we strive as a staff in terms of how we do our intake process is we never assume, you know, when families or individuals come to us, we let them really note how they want to be labeled, described, what their background is, you know, culturally, ethnicity wise. We really let them hold that to themselves instead of assuming, especially in COVID times when we're doing a lot of this remote work. And then, you know, that kind of goes in line with talking to our people, right? Our youth, they have questions. A lot of this is coming up in the past year with COVID and all the social injustices coming to the surface. And just really taking a lot of time to talk with them and learn, right? Just like Leah said, listening, you know, allowing them to have a space for asking those questions, being experts in their own diversity. And even though we all think, you know, Glen Ellyn is a very affluent town, it is. There are tons of populations, whether it's immigrant populations, refugee populations, that my staff and I, you know, we really have to get to know and do our research and our work when we're coming to the table in terms of them accessing our service, right? And being open to counseling in general, because there's a lot of cultural backgrounds that it might be their first time in a family ever accessing services for themselves. And that can be a very scary thing. So we definitely present, you know, with our own biases. I will be upfront, you know, we're a staff of 2 people and we're both female and we're both Caucasian. So that is not beyond us. Thankfully this year, it'll be our first year that we've been able to maybe expand that. So we're really looking into hiring on bilingual staff, possibly, you know, male staff, and hopefully, you know, very diverse, that we can get people in here with, you know, service background, mental health background that can really lead the charge in making sure we are inclusive and making sure our clinicians speak to that. In terms of advocacy, social justice reform, obviously, I'm a social worker. My staff members are all social workers, so we lead by our code of ethics through social work, and it has a lot about advocacy and social injustices. Whether we're working with Prairie Legal on, you know, legal advocacy, whether we're working with the local school staff on, you know, advocating for a child and their family within the school district, or the IEP population for those that might be special education needs. I think that's where we really, as a staff, are proud to say that we do the best we can with collaborating. Other agencies, other organizations. We never, you know, think we know it all. And we really try to let the families and the youth especially lead that charge as well. We recently started expanding our office bookcase, which I'm so excited for, because we have a lot of kids that come in pre-COVID and want to read books and do gameplay during their therapy treatments. And so this was something that I was really trying within the last year to expand that and make sure that we do have inclusive books that represent most of our clientele, and it's not just you know, people that don't look the same as them. I mentioned we can do better by hiring staff. I also mentioned, you know, in terms of our biases as white female clinicians, you know, there is obviously a requirement in our social work licensure that we go to cultural competency, professional education every year. And then what we're doing is we're even expanding that and trying to say, you know, go learn more. Let's do our research. Let's keep educating ourselves. Let's not just stop at the 3 credits or 6 credits, whatever it's supposed to allow us to do per every year, 2 years. So that's something. And then just board diversity. I think when you're talking about organizational leadership, we really are striving to get more people on from different backgrounds, maybe with different skill sets, different strengths that represent, our community as a whole and not just one part of it. So those are all the things that we're doing. We're really looking forward to our future. Like I said, this is the first year that we've been allowed to kind of talk through our dreams and goals as an organization. And after 40 years, it feels very refreshing to be able to bring in new eyes and new helping staff that can better support our community as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Deanna. I think with, you say you all have 2 clinicians on staff, and I think that with 2 people, anything can be a challenge. We know that, and I know that for sure as someone who has worked at many startups where it's just me and somebody else.
Absolutely.
So definitely want to just say thank you for sharing and giving us some insight into all of the work that you all have going at the organization. So at this point, I am going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Rob Wilkinson.
Great, thank you. And once again, we appreciate Dawn and the Glen Ellyn Library's efforts on this initiative. We're excited to be a part of today's panel, but also excited to be a part of the DE&I initiatives moving forward. As I mentioned earlier, we are fortunate to have provided services to the community for over 100 years. But I think that also, especially in regards to DE&I, we have to look back at our history and realize the things we did well and maybe the things we didn't do well. The Y as a whole was originally founded in 1844 in London with the sole purpose of getting young men off the street to teach them Bible study. It was successful, so eventually it came over to the United States in 1851 in Boston. And as you can imagine, with the title, the Young Men's Christian Association, it really was strictly for young men. And it wasn't until the early 20s that women were officially recognized as being able to join the organization. It didn't mean that they weren't part of the Y early on in the 1800s and early 1900s. They actually formed auxiliary groups that worked alongside the Y, and provided services during the Civil War, during World War I. But with the women's suffragette efforts in the 20s, it was time that the Y as a whole moved forward and adapted to those changes. And I think that the same is true with how the Y and the African American communities have developed, when being founded prior to the abolishment of slavery. There were a lot of Black communities, in the 1800s and early 1900s that, wanted to be part of the Y and ultimately formed Y strictly for the Black communities. In fact, in 1910, the president of Sears Roebuck, who was a white male, put a challenge out and said, "We think that this is important, so I'll help build Ys in Black communities." And within 3 years, 23 cities had new YMCA strictly for African American communities. And by 1924, there were actually 160 YMCAs specifically for Black communities. In the 1950s, actually 40s, Martin Luther King actually learned to swim at one of those YMCAs in Atlanta. And that relationship, when he was actually going out and doing a number of his civil rights speeches, he spoke specifically at African American YMCAs across the country because he knew it was a place that he could have that safe conversation. It wasn't until 1968 that racial discrimination was banned in all YMCAs across the country. But you think about the history and the challenges that during those times, and even the challenges that we have now, that it was long overdue even at that point. You know, one of the things that in more recent years that we have found is that the ability for us to recruit and retain and train African American staff. So in 2010, YMCA of the USA, which is our national organization, created a executive multicultural development program specifically for individuals of color to get them into management and executive level positions with YMCAs across the country. And a few years later, expanded that to all levels of staffing so that not only our recruitment but training was conducive of trying to be as reflective of our communities that we serve. Every local YMCA is autonomous. So we are locally operated, locally owned, run by a local board of directors. However, we all must follow our national standards in order to maintain that YMCA logo, image, and utilize the name. But you can imagine with 800 different associations just in the United States and 10,000 different communities, everyone is different. So when you're trying to get everybody to come aboard and do and follow the same guidelines, it can be very challenging. As I mentioned earlier, women's rights and not originally being accepted within the YMCA, how times have changed. There's actually more females that are members of YMCAs than there are males, and actually more female staff members than there are male staff members across the country. I mentioned that locally, we have a long history of serving the community for over 100 years. In 2019, we celebrated our 100th anniversary, and it was interesting going back and looking through all of the archives, the handwritten notes from B.R. Ryall, who was part of the organization back in the 1920s and 30s. And one interesting thing that we didn't find is we didn't find anything that stated anything in regards to segregation or discrimination, or that certain groups weren't welcome with the Y. Originally the B.R. Ryall Y was founded in Wheaton. There for a number of years there was a Y in both Glen Ellyn and Wheaton, and then in 1960s, the early 60s, they came together and became one Y. But something that I reflected just recently as I was trying to put together some notes for today's presentation was, no, we didn't come across anything in all of the archives or history. Doesn't mean that it didn't happen, but I'm hopeful that my predecessors were forward-thinking and progressive enough that that it wasn't part of our history, at least locally. As we kind of look back at 2020, it definitely was a challenging year for all businesses, nonprofits, whether it was being closed for a period of time or not being able to operate like we would have usually. But we realized that, the diversity and inclusion and equity efforts was something that we needed to lift back up as a priority for our local Y and also nationally. We're fortunate that we have a national office that has a team dedicated to diversity. So we were able to lean on them in regards to, what would be our next steps or our first steps as we begin this journey. And after a few conversations with our leadership team, we eventually created a diversity task force amongst a wide variety of our staff, from part-time staff to full-time staff, amongst all of our departments, to really look at, how do we do better? It doesn't mean that we haven't been doing great things. We're fortunate to have amazing partners in the community, whether it's one community or all of the school districts, bridge communities, Naomi's House. I mean, there's a number of organizations that we partner with to try to do the work that we do in our community, but we know that we can do better. And that task force has met numerous times, and ultimately through their recommendation, we're forming a standing committee of our board that will focus on our DE&I efforts. We know that although our staff is reflective of our community from a diversity standpoint, when we really dig into the kids that we serve and the different communities and pockets of communities that we serve, we need to be more diverse, and we need to be more, trained better in regards to how we provide programs, what needs programs there may be for different populations in different communities. I think that, we held off on doing our strategic plan because of COVID, but it's back on our radar for the end of this year or the first quarter of 2022. And the DE&I initiative is definitely a high priority in that planning process. We think that by having a standing committee of our board, that the intentionality will be put towards relooking at our training, our recruitment, all of our HR policies that relate to diversity, even all of our communications and how many things we're doing, whether it's bilingual or being able to make sure that we have a better opportunity for people to feel more welcome than maybe they do already, utilizing the Y. If you were to come through our doors, we truly are a melting pot of the community. Each year we provide hundreds of thousands of dollars of financial assistance in order to make sure that a family or an individual's financial status isn't a barrier. And we really want everybody who come through the doors to be at the same level, whether it's their ethnicity, their religion, or their financial status. It doesn't matter, and you shouldn't know, and it shouldn't make a difference as you utilize the Y or our services. As I kind of wrap up my comments, one, we know we need to do better, but in our mission statement, and then even in our national organization's mission statement, it ends with the words "for all." And as simple as those two words mean, for all, or sound, it truly is what we stand for. And does it mean that we've been doing things right? Probably not, or not as well as we could. But if we're not living up to those two words, we're truly not doing what we were placed on this earth to do. So, I appreciate the time. Looking forward to the continued conversation, but hopefully it gives you a little better insight on the why.
Thank you so much, Rob, for just giving us so much insight into the history of the Y. And I know that as you all continue to do this work, and as we continue to talk about and learn how to center ourselves around DEI, that the Y will be a great part of how we move forward. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I am going to go ahead at this point and pass the mic to Janine. I'm going to have Janine go ahead and give your talk at this point. You can take the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate getting to talk a little bit more. So learning just a little bit more about the Glenbard Early Childhood Collaborative, because we're so new, I feel like a little background will kind of help understand where we are as far as our DEI work. Our current mission, which some of our exciting later news and DEI work means that this is being revised. But our current mission says that in partnership with the community, we work to increase awareness and quality learning and access to quality learning experiences for all children birth to 5 and their families. We were formed through a partnership with CASE, our special ed cooperative here in Glen Ellyn, 5 neighboring elementary districts, including D41 and D89. Our libraries, our Glen Ellyn Public Library was really one of our founding partners. and other providers to families in different regards across our community. Our focus is really on kindergarten readiness, increasing birth to 3 and pre-K opportunities, increased developmental screenings, parent education supports, connecting to resources, and really reducing and eliminating barriers. All with the mantra of empowering parents as the first or their primary caregiver as the first and most important teacher of the child. We know the most formative years for brain development happen in the early years, most significantly before the child turns 3. And so access to supports for families before they reach school is really vital and critical. In regards to our DEI work, some of it has really been more boots on the ground and some of it's been more higher level infrastructure building. Getting started, we took what I kind of look at now as an informal approach to DEI. We looked at programming and supports in the area. We looked at family we knew could use them but weren't getting them, and we explored barriers. We recognized that cost, transportation, hours of operation, language, culture, faith sometimes could all be barriers. We've worked actively from the beginning to respond to these as we've identified them. Recognizing transportation is an issue. Prior to additional funding, we started hosting events in walking distance for families so that, kind of just trying to take that barrier away. We had a really great birth to 3 program for parents in District 41 that was modestly funded. It had some limitations. It had a max of just 10 families and so many more that could use it. Mobility, like what if a family moved across the street to better housing? Like, yay. But what if that street was Roosevelt Road or North Avenue? Suddenly they are out of the district and could no longer benefit from the services provided. I could really go on, but we saw a need. And when the chance came, our collab and CASE, our parent organization, along with the support of the districts, were able to grow this program to now covering over 5 school districts, serving over 90 families. And as of today, 44 of those families are Glen Ellyn families. So going from 10 to significantly more across school districts, just from expanding those conversations with different partners. With that funding, we were actually also really able to expand supports to families. Hiring native speaking home visitors in Spanish, Hindi, Urdu, home visitors with diverse backgrounds. We built in funding for additional interpreters, additional transportation, so we could have groups in different places and families could get rides. We were also able to increase parent-child interaction groups that families could come to that were free and open-ended and open to all. We were able to start pop-up groups in the pre-COVID times. In the summers, we would actually pop up at different neighborhood parks and just open up and introduce ourselves, have community partners there, all with that hope of trying to reach families where they are. Again, we think part of what we've identified over time is that some families aren't aware of things that are available to them birth to 5. And if we can reach them and share that, we feel like that's a way of connecting families with resources. We worked with Glenbard Parent Series and Gilda, who's amazing, on providing early childhood events for families. Through some of this additional funding, we've been able a couple times, we saw families that still weren't coming, even though we thought this was great, but we found out that language was a barrier, childcare, transportation, kind of uneasiness, is it for them? And so through those conversations with parents, we really made some adaptations and have, for some of our programming, been able to provide transportation to some of our families, interpretation, childcare. We're really hoping to expand this when we're back in live groups, but we're really just trying to be responsive. We were really fortunate to be accepted into a cohort with Illinois Action for Children's Partner Plan Act. That's a mouthful. Our team made up of folks from CASE, Glen Ellyn Public Library, District 89, and the DuPage Early Childhood Collaborative, worked with our coaches to take a different approach to our work. So we came together using data-driven practices to really come to consensus on a common goal. And through this, we recognized pretty significant gaps in kindergarten readiness and developmental screenings. And by disaggregating the data, we could really recognize where the disparities lied. The biggest shift in our thinking, in our practice, in our actions were a result of practices, but also the tools, training, and reflective space that they provided to us. We took a really deep dive into looking at our work from an equity lens. And kind of one of the first steps we took was we took a tailored equity self-assessment tool as a team. And this was the moment when we realized we had to go way deeper in our practices to truly be infusing and embedding DEI in all that we do. The tool was meant to be a baseline, and it really helped us to reframe our focus. So many of the things that I've heard shared already in this group and the previous one about that education, that deeper awareness of the folks who are involved with the families. It really was a turning point for our team and for the collab. Our biggest takeaway from this process was the absence of parents as our collab partners. Everything our collaborative and our partners was working on was for parents and families of our youngest learners. We met at least 8 times a year between small and large groups, and we never made an active effort to include parents. We didn't intentionally exclude them, but nothing said, hey parents, you're welcome, really your voices are the most important, because really they are, but our actions didn't show it. And so what we're doing now is we're trying to respond to the things we've learned. Part of it is continuing with some of those things we know we're doing well, the Birth to 3 program, extending groups, really trying to pursue developmental screenings for all. Working with Glenbard Parent Series, not just in early childhood, but taking that focus. I know this month or next month, we have Tyrone Howard coming, which is so exciting. And it's going to be a virtual event, which I think will really make it nice for some families who maybe would have other barriers in getting there. They can just turn it on. So we're really excited about that. We've expanded our DEI training through our partnership with Partner Plan Act. We were able to have 12 of our partners participate in an all-day introduction to systemic racism training. And it really helped us all to be on the same page of our background knowledge as we're moving forward. I think it gave us a lot of common knowledge, understandings, still so much more to learn, but just it gave us a foundation to build on. And moving forward, I'm really hoping to be doing more of that. I mentioned our parents before, and I didn't forget about them. We have started a parent advisory council for the Glenbard Early Childhood Collaborative. In fact, moving forward, we knew we couldn't do it without them. So in the middle of the pandemic, we started a totally new program. Since October, our parents have met virtually multiple times. They've also attended our collaborative meetings. They conducted vision exercises. They collaborated with us on a community-wide survey, and they're guiding us in revising our mission and vision to reflect the vision of the families. Steps we've taken to make this happen. We've provided interpreters. We've learned more about Zoom than we ever thought possible, and interpretation features to be able to do it in live time if necessary. We've adapted our times of meeting to meet the parents' needs and listen. When they say they'd rather have topics ahead of time before the meeting so they could look over it, we did it. When they said, remind us lots for the meetings, we're worried we'll forget, we did it. And moving forward, when we can meet in person again someday, we're really, we've built more into our budget, money for transportation, for childcare services, for in-person interpretation to be able to keep these things moving forward. In addition, we've really been trying to respond to these crises over the past year from more of an equity lens. We worked with our county-wide early childhood collab and other local collabs in identifying financial supports to families most impacted by the effects of COVID, who are least likely to be available for or eligible for any additional supports. We coordinated with a lot of our partners to identify needs of families due to COVID, and we provided some with masks, books, educational kits, just the families lacking the resources to obtain them on their own. And just a big shout out to Glen Ellyn Public Library and CASE and the DuPage Early Childhood Collab and the NAACP, who all were so generous in supporting us in so many ways with that. Our partners are busy with this too. This isn't just us. Our partners are really active in this DEI work. And I think that's been such a strength for us to be able to share what we're learning together across our programs and organizations. There's still so much more to do. With screenings, we've really looked a lot at common messaging. How can we dispel the myths? We actually had parent focus groups to find out like what's happening. Why are our screening numbers so low? And we found out some parents didn't know about it. Some were fearful of the screening process. Some were fearful of labeling. Some were fearful and kind of nervous about the school system. And so, you know, learning these things and knowing like these are the things we need to work forward and push through are really vital. We really are working every day at trying to figure out how to reach the hard to find families. And because we know those are the families that we just need to reach the most, and then work with our families to identify not only what are the resources that would best support them, but also like what are the ones that they'd want to do. We know we have lots of great ideas, but if it's not something that's going to work for their schedule, for their family, it's really not a great idea. And so, you know, really working with them to provide authentic supports is a big goal of ours. And then really just working on expanding our conversation between our partners, between our schools, all of our organizations. We have so much more to grow to build that foundational conversation and knowledge. And we know we can't do it alone. So that's where we are right now. Still lots to learn for sure.
Thank you so much for sharing, Janine. You all are up to a lot over there. And it's been really good to hear a little bit about it. And so in light of wanting to continue the conversation around EDI and just in terms of what we're doing today, I think it makes sense to pass it over to Jamie.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to do a screen share. Okay, am I sharing? Okay. All right, so I am here representing the Allies for Racial Justice in Glen Ellyn. There we go. So we're a little bit different. We are a Facebook group, so we're not really an official organization, just a group of people that are interested in doing racial justice work. We were created on June 9th, so it's pretty new. It was definitely created in response to the George Floyd murder and subsequent conversations on Glen Ellyn groups. We felt like there was a need for this. And so myself and actually my brother, Ben Lafontaine, and his wife, Amy Mendoza Lafontaine, decided to start this group. So we are the admins of the group. We have about 425 members, and actually that's really growing as of today. So I think we're up to like 440 today. So that's kind of exciting. I mentioned the vision of the group earlier. Really the idea is we wanted to create a safe space for people to talk about anti-racist work from wherever they're at. So everybody's coming at this from a different point. so we were interested in kind of creating a safe space for people to ask questions, share ideas, share resources. So really the only requirement is that you want to do this work. You want to be an anti-racist. And so we have some questions when you join to make sure that, you know, we're vetting people a little bit, but other than that, that's all we're really looking for is some sort of, you know, even a minor commitment to doing the work. So what have we done? A lot of it is obviously sharing because it's Facebook. I'm sure many of you are part of Facebook groups. A lot of it is, you know, sharing recommendations for books, movies, TV shows, podcasts that talk about anti-racism. Sometimes it's just simply, you know, what are some shows that have BIPOC characters that my kids might be interested in, things like that. Political campaign and election information, you know, really looking at candidates that support anti-racist work, obviously in, you know, the US elections, but also local elections, and how do you create a voting plan and really focusing on those candidates that are interested in doing this work. Sharing online courses. We have some people who are taking online courses right now in anti-racist work, workshops, presentations. One that was really beloved, I know we've already had a shout out to the Glenbard Parent Series, but Jason Reynolds spoke, and he's just incredible. And that was really exciting. We share related news stories, obviously, information on other groups, actually some of the groups that are here. We try to share, you know, if you want to be a member of those organizations or donate to those organizations, any kind of information about local groups. And I should mention too, that it's not just anti-racist work. You know, we have, we share a lot of information on any kind of social justice. You know, Outspoken is an LGBTQ organization out of Wheaton. They're part of the group. So it's really related to a lot of different social justice activities in the area. We've, you know, shared a lot of petitions, articles on suggestions about how to be a better anti-racist, protest information. There were a couple of events in Glen Ellyn last summer, I guess it is. I'm so confused about timing right now, but I think it was last summer. You know, things like that. And then obviously with MLK this week, we shared a lot of service ideas, so ways to get involved to really make it a day of service as opposed to just a day off. Another thing we've done other than sharing is obviously discussions. And again, we try to create a safe space so that we can have discussions. I don't think we've had any that I felt like went too far one way or the other. I think everybody's really supportive because we're there for the same goal, but obviously there's different ways to get there. We've discussed the renaming of public buildings. We discussed trigger warnings when we share, you know, some of the videos that have come out, articles. We now make sure that we put a trigger warning. The effects of the pandemic on BIPOC populations, especially in terms of education. That's been a big conversation piece. Appropriate wording, you know, what words do we use? Not everybody is comfortable with, you know, Black versus African-American versus BIPOC, and what do those all mean? Dealing with racist family and friends, that always comes up, you know, at the holidays and that sort of thing. So we've talked about that. The role of white people in anti-racist work. And, you know, that's big in Glen Ellyn, and that's something we really need to be honest about. And where do we fall in this work? And then, of course, how to educate our children, and, you know, not to make things better for our generation, but for theirs as well, and making sure that we're raising our kids to be anti-racist. So actions, what have we done? So even though we're a Facebook group, we have done a few actionable items. We ordered and delivered about 150 Black Lives Matter signs. I kind of lost count because actually, and this is where the honesty comes in, we've dealt with signs being stolen, being defaced in Glen Ellyn. I've done a lot of reordering to replace signs. So you know, if you think that things aren't happening in Glen Ellyn, they are. Supported businesses that are supporting Black Lives Matter. There was a small group of people trying to not support those businesses that had signs, and we really tried to do the opposite and say, you know, to anti-boycott, I guess you could say. We've written letters to the Glen Ellyn Police Department about Black Lives Matter and, you know, just kind of the role that it fits in our police department and what work are they doing to combat police brutality. We've participated in COVID safety kit donations. The NAACP in the area did a big drive for that. We participated in that. And then also District 41. And they were just, you know, masks and hand sanitizer and things like that. And then of course we've had celebrations. I mean, we've had some amazing things happen this year. Just as an example, the Washington NFL team and the Cleveland baseball team both got rid of their, you know, racist names, and we have the first Black vice president, female vice president, woohoo. So we've had a lot of, you know, good wins nationally. So what are we currently doing? All of the above. Obviously, we've been talking about this, the Glen Ellyn DEI initiative, and what that means for our group, and also just the surrounding area. We've discussed the insurrection in the Capitol a couple weeks ago and other current events, you know, as they relate to our mission and sharing that information. And then I think a really important thing that's coming up is sharing information on local election candidates. Our local elections are in April, and, you know, that involves school board, library, village board. And again, just the idea that we want to put people in who care about racial justice and DEI work. So where are we going? What do we plan to do? I'm going to be really honest here. And at the end of the year, you know, when George Floyd and the protests and everything was happening, there was a lot of involvement on the page, right? You know, we got tons of members right away. Everybody raring to go, like, what do we need to do? It waned for a while. You know, I would say I can actually, I saw on Facebook, I didn't put it here, I should have, but it kind of showed the graph of like involvement on the page, right? So you see this like huge spike and then maybe like a leveling off, and then it kind of like really dipped for a while. And then as the election came up, started to go up a little more. And right now, because of this event, I feel like people are re-engaged. So I feel like that's so important. And, you know, I've been mulling over this meme that I found months ago. It was shared by Rachel Cargill, which if you're not following her, you should be. She's amazing. But I'll just read it to you. Anti-racism work is not a self-improvement exercise for white people. And then she gives the list, how to be a better white person. Read 3 anti-racist books, listen to 1619, follow 10 BIPOC on Instagram, watch 13th and When They See Us, and donate $25 to 4 BIPOC causes. Those are amazing things. And it's an amazing place to start. But where do you go from there? And what do we do now? And I'm extremely thankful to the Glen Ellyn Library and our community to feel like we are taking that next step. I think a lot of us have read the books, we've watched the movies, like we get it from that point. And now we need to figure out how do we move it forward. You know, so we're educated now a little bit, right? We understand it a little bit more, but how do we actually do something about it? How do we change this? And especially, you know, in our little corner of the world. So that's what, you know, I've been struggling with, and I'm sure everyone is. And, you know, that's why I'm excited about this project. And then I just shared another meme that I like, anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobic, anti-transphobic, kindness without action is meaningless. So we can all talk about how we're all these things, but we have to actually do things, actively be involved. And I guess that's it. So thank you so much, and I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for sharing. You know, I want you to know that you all are not alone in this place where you feel kind of like stuck and where do we do next and why did the engagement drop, right? Like this is things that we see all the time, right? And this is part of the reason why we are choosing to go alongside organizations to ensure that, you know, there is a consistent way forward for you all. So yeah, just thank you. I think that before I pass it, one of the things I want to kind of just highlight is how a lot of the organizations we come across, right, the biggest challenge is around how do we create space for people to have conversation. And I think that it's really interesting and unique to me that, you know, you all are experimenting with an online space, and what does it look like to use this online platform and cultivate a vulnerable space for people to have hard conversations online. So definitely interested in, you know, talking more about that. So thank you. I see that we do have some questions coming up in the chat. Just want to let everyone know that you are welcome to add your questions to the chat box. We have been keeping track of those questions, and when we move over into our Q&A part of the conversation, we will dive right into them. So keep them coming, keep them coming, keep them coming. And I am going to move right along and pass it over to Dr. Sonia.
Thank you. Okay, you can hear me, right?
We can hear you.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Wait a minute. Can you see the PowerPoint? All right, very good. The name of our organization is One Community. So I thought that sometimes telling our story through pictures is effective. So I kind of want to start with how we were formed. We're not very old. Is it transitioning? Sometime I have trouble. Do you see a new slide? Okay, very good. Okay. So as I mentioned in my brief introduction at the beginning, One Community is an initiative which was established to embrace our community's diversity, and more importantly, to raise awareness, acceptance, and involvement. Involvement is very critical. It's the presence of diversity is not sufficient if we are not involved with each other, because then we do not understand, and that's where a lot of prejudice comes from. Our mission, as a result, is to actually build our community one relationship at a time, and to create a society which is going to be free of bias, discrimination, and unequal treatment, right? That's the mission of a DEI organization, I believe, at the end. So just to give you a little bit of how we started, and some stories like what Jamie pointed out and others have some resonance here. So I want to tell you a little bit about how we actually got started. There were events that were happening in Glen Ellyn, or actions that a number of us found very disturbing. Some of them were, you know, we started informally in 2018, and obviously there were some things with signs. There was also responses that we are getting, and people, or actions towards people which were not very friendly, and there was no structured way which we would see in the community that was being handled. So we actually reached out to community organizations in the area and said, hey, we see this as an issue. you guys, you know, are in that space in general, we would like to talk to you. Is there something we can do? And that's where our first community dialogue actually happened. We just reach out to organizations, including YMCA, who's here today, is Glen Ellyn Children's Resource Center, just to say, hey, let's have this conversation. That was in February 2018. And we actually talked about, our intent wasn't necessarily to create a new organization, but to see if we could leverage even the organizations that were there to create a community where we can develop understanding. And actually at that discussion, everybody felt that it would be beneficial to have a group which is focused specifically on that. And that's how actually One Community was born. And the I shouldn't say funny thing, the very interesting thing that at that meeting was mentioned was, could we, not everybody who needs to be here in this conversation are here today, obviously, because we don't have personal relationship with all of them, and that's the key. So we actually followed up with what we called a community potluck, where we asked everybody to bring another friend who needs to be at the table. So that's how we actually got started. We had obviously more than twice the number of people, and everybody had to kind of share a little bit of story of how they got to this time and place. We may have taken many different paths, but we have got here at this time and place somehow, and we need to appreciate those stories, right? So that's how we got started. So since then, I just want to kind of share the 4 major thrusts of our work. We build relationships to build community. And we also realize, as everybody said, we have to expand our knowledge base. Knowledge is always, we need to grow that, and that helps us to do the relationships and the community work. And then we want to influence our local government to provide more of a larger framework so that these work has a more permanent place and connection, right? So I'll kind of briefly go through some of this so you get a sense for what we are doing. So when it comes to building relationships, after our potluck, one of the first things we did is what we call Meet Your Neighbor Day. It was a simple thing to do. We were very new, is go introduce yourself to one person that you don't know, one person. And we actually did it in partnership with the Glen Ellyn Park District with their Earth Day. We had a table there, and we were there meeting friends and saying what we were all about. And really, we have to build friendships and relationships that we don't have today, right? That's the key. So from there, we went to what we called the summer community picnic. We obviously had connected with a number of organizations. We have made some new friends. And we said, hey, you bring more friends. We need to get to know each other at a personal level. And we had summer community picnics. We've had it 18 and 19, obviously in 2020, we couldn't due to the pandemic, but you can see, we have met people who we would have not met otherwise. It's not sufficient that we live in the same community, but have so different of an experience that we never connect. And that's where a lot of these prejudices come from. So we had these community picnics. The first year was at Glen Ellyn Park, and next year the Y was very generous to let us share that space. And we met people and connected with people and played games with people that we didn't know before, and got to learn their experience. So building on that, we have had what we called sharing our stories. So as we made new friends, we felt that we had to go deeper. So tell me the path that you have taken to get to today. How is it different? What are the challenges you have, or, you know, what are the experiences that people don't find out about just talking to you for five minutes. So we partnered actually with Glen Ellyn Public Library, and Dawn was very helpful in sharing the space. We had community members who have come from different parts of the country and different regions of the world, and the challenges that they faced, and the experience, some not so pleasant that they had, and some obviously very encouraging. They shared these stories, and it really felt that we were getting to know the experiences of others that we cannot even imagine, right? And so we have done that actually for a couple of years as well. 2019 and 2020, actually, we were very fortunate to be able to have these partner with the Glenbard schools, Glenbard West specifically, where our high school students, again, with different backgrounds and different experiences and different places where they came from, shared their experience and how it feels to be in Glen Ellyn. It was really, really powerful. And I do have to thank Glenbard Schools for, and particularly Kristen Brand, department chair at Glenbard West, who helped us put this together. And as you can tell, we also had fun. I mean, the kids over here, this was after, you know, it was a really enjoyable and in-depth conversation and a learning experience. So again, going down in these deeper conversations, you know, we got into some tough stuff. Okay, so after the events of George Floyd, you know, the George Floyd event, we felt that, you know, even beyond the storytelling, we needed to have conversations to bring together our police departments and Black students and community members in focused discussions. So these are by invitation. It's not an open to the public, but so that we could have a safe space where we can have really, really difficult conversation. You know, how it feels, why, you know, why do people of color feel a certain way when they see certain things, or, you know, here, not in the nation as a whole, but right here as they walk to school or walk to the grocery store or whatever they do, and what those feelings are. I have to, so we've actually had 4 police chiefs join us. We started with Bill Norton, our Glen Ellyn police chief. Now we have 4 different police chiefs, number of school resource officers. We have number of Black community members, as well as many students. We started this in July, and we have this on a monthly basis. And we've grown because people have, you know, has said, hey, this is an important conversation. And I want to kind of share with you one story from here, because it tells how these conversations reveal things which we would not know otherwise. In our December meeting, a former Black student, a former Black student, I mean, he's still Black, but former student, that's what I mean, shared, and as we approach February, what he said is, February is a very difficult month for him. That was kind of interesting. Why is February such a difficult month? Well, it's because it's an African-American History Month. And this would seem fairly counterintuitive, but he said, well, it's very difficult because when he was in school, kids would come up and ask him whether he knew any slaves. Now, if you don't actually go through that experience, you would know, I mean, you think this is it's an initiative to try to honor the history, right? But it's not always that way. What it looks on the surface is not what it is. And, you know, so this is kind of one of those reflections, but I have to say that we've had I definitely want to thank the police departments for their involvement. I definitely want to thank the Glenbard schools, the Glenbard Parent Series, in connecting us with the students, the teachers, as well as the community members. We feel we're making tiny progress, right? We're making progress. These are difficult conversations. So while we do have picnics, we do share our stories together, we also have some of these difficult conversations. So this helps us, what we call is building community. So I'll go back to maybe I shouldn't say lighter, but one of the things that we have done the last few years is participate in the 4th of July parade. And what you see at the bottom is actually from 2018. So what we thought we would do, we have a lot of partner organizations with, there's churches, mosques, synagogues, there's the Y, the Kiwanis Club, Glen Children's Resource Center, there's Rotary Club, Glen Public Library. We invited everybody to say, hey, bring your banners because you represent diversity. And we will all walk behind a one community banner saying that, yes, we may have different beliefs, we come from different places, we do different things, but we are indeed one community. And as you can see all the different groups that were there. It was just incredible. So just a few pictures from the 4th of July parades over the 2 years. We had, it was an uplifting moment. There were so many people, and we didn't know all these people from before. It's not like these are, my friends, or they are my friends now, but we didn't know them before. So you can see, there's smaller groups, Pizza and Social Justice, which does great work in actually some of those conversations. You can see the diversity of organizations as people. And it really was incredible to actually celebrate the diversity on the 4th of July. So moving on from there, all our gatherings are not always as uplifting, though necessary. We held what we call Lights for Liberty. When there were reports of children in custody at our borders after family separation, which were horrific. And so there was an initiative actually nationwide, which was called Lights for Liberty. And we held one here in downtown Glen Ellyn to say that, human values, irrespective of what your, political beliefs, maybe your human values means that you don't separate your children from their parents. And the cruelty and the stories that were coming in, it was just horrific. So we had the Lights for Liberty where we lit, candles, obviously, to denounce what was going on. We had one of my friends, pediatrician in the area, who spoke to what it happens to children when they're traumatized this way, as well as organizations which help immigrant children. So we felt that was necessary to speak up and do so in public and in downtown Glen Ellyn. And as you can see, there was a huge turnout for that particular event. So then, other than obviously events, as we went into COVID-19 situation in building our community, or rather at this point in supporting our community, we've done things like, we called it Campaign Against COVID-19, and we created these little graphics with the general information that, stay 6 feet away, stay inside, but we actually work with the Glenbard students to create this in many different languages. We had obviously English, Spanish, Bengali, French, Vietnamese, And we shared these through our social media channels so that people could easily share them with family who spoke different languages. And it was an easy way to spread this. This was in April, so obviously this was very early in the COVID days to make sure this information was getting out. And again, we also supported the Giving DuPage Days to help not-for-profits in the area who was under more stress due to COVID to help community members. So we actually, the one community board members walked 715 miles as it was put 2 times around the DuPage County, which is 336 square miles. So if you do one mile for each square mile, so we did 2 laps and raised $1,500 for local charities to help people who are in need during this difficult time. We also realized when things happen, we need to stand by our friends. So when, if you recall the event in Pittsburgh where a synagogue was attacked, there was Show Up for Shabbat denouncing that. So we were there with our friends at Es Chaim. There are no pictures from that because Shabbat services say that we not take pictures. Similarly, after the Christchurch shooting, the Islamic Foundation here had a gathering to, reflect on that and send notes actually to Christchurch. So we were there to participate and support that. As I was mentioning though, so all these actions, we realize how much more we have to learn, right? I mean, I was telling you about the Black History Month. I mean, that came out through a conversation. We need to, all of us, no matter how enlightened we think we are, we have learnings to do. So we have actually partnered with different organizations. So if, by the way, if you guys have not seen The Long Shadow, which is a documentary, it's really exposes the lingering effects of slavery to this day. The shadow of slavery. I would really recommend you watch that. There was Together as Better Alliance was the one who we partnered with for the first showing in the area, as well as Glenbard Parent Series. So that was getting to be 3 years ago. We had that first showing. We also partner with Glenbard Parent Series, and actually Gilda is on our board. You can see the various Glenbard Parent Series that we have sponsored with GPS, of course. Talk to Me is, the power of dialogue. Actually, the speaker, Qasim Rashid, is a graduate of Glencrest Middle School and Glenbard South. He's a civil rights lawyer. Incredibly moving as to his personal experiences in Glen Ellyn growing up and what actually, communicating with people and how you break down those barriers. It was very enlightening. We had Nick Stone, and her book, actually, The Dear Martin, is a young student who was dealing with a friend being shot and died. And the Dear Martin, his letters to Martin Luther King as to why this is happening. So it's really pretty incredible. Then Killers of the Flower Moon, obviously, is the tragic history and of handling of the Native Americans in our country. Same with Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, is more about stereotyping of what we think about certain communities. And Jamie also mentioned we co-sponsors with GPS The Long Way Down, which is the cycle of violence that we sometimes happens in in the community, in our surrounding communities, in our community, and how we need to handle that. Actually, we had all the 4 public libraries in this area co-sponsor that one as well. So, and we will continue to do this. Actually, the next one coming up is with Dr. Tyrone Howard, which is on February 25th on race and culture matters. So it's an ongoing process. And then what I would like to do is, so building on the knowledge, what we also try to do is actually make an impact on our local government so we can make structural changes which makes our community more welcoming and breaks down those barriers. I want to, going back again a few years, there were incidents which happened in Glen Ellyn, and actually there were also notes which were left, very racist and threatening notes that were left in public schools, which one community members addressed at the village board, and we had drafted a welcoming community resolution. Okay, so we spoke there. It took a while. It took 10 months, but we did, with the help of a number of board members, and I want to thank them, at the Glen Ellyn Village Board, the resolution did pass, which is, I just call it the Welcoming Community Resolution. You could definitely look that up. I'm not going to read this over here, but we thought that was important to reinforce that, because I think the village, when the village speaks, it speaks to all community members, and it is important that it speaks and even says the things which are obvious, because it may not be obvious to everybody. It does need to make those statements. And then when, we've also been involved in our communities around, and I do want to say that there was some disturbing signs that were left in Lombard, and the Lombard Village Board took action, like immediately put a post out, and we actually want to thank them, because I think we also have to recognize when our leaders are doing the right thing and doing what is right for the community. So we did go and commend them for doing the same. And we have done so actually also, like after the George Floyd events, our village president, Glen Ellyn, also put out a statement, and we did write to her and the village board for making that statement, because it's important. Words matter. But our work continues with the village board, and I think some village board members may be on the call. So we do urge the inclusion of that welcoming community resolution we talked about in the Glen Ellyn comprehensive plan. We have shared this with them, because the comprehensive plan is a blueprint of our community, and we feel welcoming community resolution needs to be a part of that we are a welcoming community. I think it's important to do that, or at least as one community, we feel that is important to do that. So we continue to obviously engage, not at a very individual and personal level with community members, with entities in our community, and as well as our local government, to hopefully make just at least a tiny bit of impact to move us forward. So I just want to say in conclusion that I've mentioned a lot of groups. These are, you don't have to read them right here. We have over 30 plus organizations that we have worked with in advancing the mission of one community. And I just want to leave with a statement which we put out actually on Juneteenth of last year, that we obviously, and I do want to read this, one community stands for inclusive and anti-racist values everywhere. Our society will thrive if and only if everyone is free of prejudice, bias, discrimination, and unequal treatment. So, and actually in the Long Shadow, if you do watch it, there's one thing which is said that if you're used to privilege, equality feels like oppression. So we all need to recognize that as well. But anyway, so with that, thank you. And I will stop right here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. One of the things that I do want to know is definitely want to just apply your capacity for considering storytelling as a part of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And on the flip side of that, I also want to just note for all of our panelists here today, the struggle of our panelists and our listeners, the struggle of being direct in how we call out racist behavior, right? It can be a lot of dancing around. We can call it different things, but we have to be adamant about how we call out racist behavior. So thank you so much, Dr. I, for sharing. And last but not least, I am going to move over to Clara. And after we hear from Clara, we will jump into a few of the questions we have from our community today. Clara, you have the mic.
Thank you, Mickey. And I want to thank Dawn and all of your collaborators for making this event possible today. And thank you for inviting me. I am here to talk about the work of DuPage United, to briefly describe who DuPage United is, to talk about some recent examples of the work that we're doing in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And lastly, to let you know how you can learn more about DuPage United and how you can get involved. I mentioned in my introduction that DuPage United is a social action group, and one of my fellow leaders gave me just an illustrious example of how to frame the work that DuPage United does. We think we're all familiar with the teach a man to fish example. The work of DuPage United is to go beyond teaching a person to fish. The work of DuPage United makes sure that that person has equal opportunity to learn how to fish, has equal opportunity to get a fishing license, and has equal access to clean water in which to fish in. So that is the work of DuPage United. We are a group of multi-faith and nonprofit organizations in DuPage United, collectively organized to be a voice for those who do not have a voice. We are affiliated regionally and nationally. So when we find out that there's an issue that goes beyond our local community, beyond DuPage County, we can collectively act regionally or even nationally to make change. So how do we work? How do we get things done? The first thing we do, and I've heard this from all of you, is deep listening. It is so important to listen. And we listen to the members within our institutions, mine being First Congregational Church Glen Ellyn. We hold listening sessions. And as we gather what's important to our members in terms of social justice issues, we vet those among our leadership. And then we determine what big problems we have can be distilled down into actually doable, actionable items. And that's an important step of our group. And then the other thing we do is we develop and we prepare our leaders. We make sure that we are all comfortable with relationship building skills, with problem solving skills, and that we're confident and ready to garner that respect that we need to actively be a voice for those who don't have a voice. And then finally, we are fiercely nonpartisan. Our purpose is to make social justice change. We work with everyone, and we're not tied to any government funding, so we can be free, independent change agents. Our funding comes from member dues and from private nonprofit grants. I want to give you some examples of what we're working on right now in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's three big areas. And the first one I'm going to talk about is affordable, accessible, and supportive housing. That is housing for working families and individuals. That is housing for seniors. and that is housing for those individuals with special needs that just need a little bit more help so that they can be independent, functioning, contributing members of a community. Our sister organization out in Kane County, Fox River Valley Initiative, was recently successful in getting a 48-unit accessible, affordable, supportive housing development in Elgin. And the reason why they were successful is because they had built relationships with community leaders and residents, and they saw an opportunity. Some of our members are also nonprofit housing developers. They were able to collaborate with Full Circle Housing and unanimously get this approved. So where once was a historical building and a lot of vacant property, now stands a very lovely community that has a blend of housing. It just looks fabulous. And we're just so happy to see that in Kane County. And recently, 40 leaders of DuPage United and our local community in Glen Ellyn and DuPage County took a tour of this facility, so that it's really a campus. It's not a block of apartments or anything like that. It's really cute little duplexes and things like that. We took a tour of it so that we could get a vision of what's possible to build in DuPage County. And we'd like to see a few of these in DuPage County. You know, one in every district is what we'd like to see. The other issue, a huge initiative that we've been working on for the last couple of years is in the area of mental health. We're working with the DuPage County Sheriff's Department and the state's attorney's office to increase crisis intervention training among law enforcement officers. Overwhelmingly, officers who have been trained in crisis intervention training say that they are more confident and more comfortable going on a call because they can recognize and successfully de-escalate when there's a situation involving someone in a mental health crisis, So they're able to do that, but they need some place to bring this person. And we all know that jail in the emergency room is not a place to bring someone who's undergoing a mental health crisis. So as part of our initiative, we started looking at alternatives, and crisis stabilization units are a good alternative, designed specifically to help people that are undergoing a mental health crisis, to stabilize them and then to link them to other professional resources that they will need so that they can go back into the community and live as a responsible citizen within that community. When we were looking into crisis stabilization units and realizing that these are far less expensive than emergency rooms for treatment of this sort, we were wondering why there weren't more of them. And what we discovered is that hospital executives said that while they support the idea of crisis stabilization units, they couldn't possibly operate them. The state reimbursement rate for daily reimbursement rate for a crisis stabilization unit, we discovered, was $29 a day. And that's just not, it's not feasible to run a unit on that kind of reimbursement rate. We have a relationship with the governor's office, and we brought this to the attention of the governor. And quickly, the governor realized that this needed to change. And a year and a half ago, and only 3 weeks after we had spoken to the governor, that reimbursement rate was increased from $29 a day to $900 a day. And what this resulted in terms of our suburban landscape is that a crisis stabilization unit in Aurora could start construction. And we also have a crisis service unit in DuPage County where the former youth home was. And now that facility can also function with proper reimbursement rates. I don't think it's yet open, but we're really happy that this happened and that we can bring the kind of services that special populations in our community need into our fold. And then the last thing I want to talk about, and it's not really an initiative, it's more of it's a fundamental principle that we welcome human diversity of culture and faith and color. Our membership, actually our founding members were a Christian church, a Jewish synagogue, and a Muslim mosque. Those are the three founding institutions back in 2003 when DuPage United got started. We've celebrated and we have fellowship among each other. We've gathered in solidarity in our mosques, our synagogues, and churches, in parking lots to prayerfully respond in the aftermath of hate crimes and other significant issues that have occurred all across our country. We're currently working with the Sheriff's Department as an advisor for cultural bias training resources for the county law enforcement officers. And we're beginning conversations with our community leaders to listen to the challenges that communities face in bringing diversity, equity, and inclusion into their discussions, into those conversations, and encouraging them to create forums like this to engage community members and leaders to create awareness, break down fears and false ideologies, to create a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. And the last thing, Mickey, you asked us to give you an idea about our challenges and our opportunities. And I think for the organization of DuPage United, one of the biggest challenges is building relationships, because there's a lot of relationships that have to be built. And ideally, what we want to do is have those relationships with our public leaders in place before we need them, so that when we do have an issue, like we did this crisis stabilization, our reimbursement rate is a perfect scenario. We didn't know that this was the issue. We didn't know what the issue was, but through our research and questioning and talking to hospital executives and everybody that we knew, we found out it was the reimbursement rate. And because we had a relationship with the governor's office, we were able to get that changed. That doesn't happen all the time. And we celebrate those things when they do happen, because that means that we can get things done. I think personally, in terms of opportunities and challenges, I also see DuPage United as a way to have fellowship with people who might not live next door to me here in Glen Ellyn. Over the 2 years ago, over the summer, I was very involved with the ICNA organization in Glendale Heights. ICNA is the Islamic Circle of North America. And in the summer, they do this wonderful backpack drive. And not that I guess I have to say, I took a vacation from buying school supplies for my kids because they're adults now. And so now I'm all excited. I get to buy school supplies again. And I spent an afternoon with other women stuffing backpacks and learning what it's like to be a Muslim woman, and all the wonderful things that organization is doing that is outside of their own faith institution and within communities here, like in DuPage County, Rogers Park, and then nationally. So that's pretty much what we're doing a lot, but that's a very brief thumbnail sketch. If you want to learn more about DuPage United or how you can get involved, you can contact me. You can talk with leaders in your institution. Your institution may be a member, but maybe it's quiet right now, and maybe they need somebody like you to engage and get them active in some of the initiatives that we're working on right now, or bring in new initiatives to the forefront that need to be addressed. And you can go online to our website at DuPageUnited.org and learn all the ways that you can support our organization. So that's a brief sketch of the organization of DuPage United and what we've been doing to work toward the ideal community that is diverse and equitable and inclusive. And again, I appreciate your invitation and this opportunity to speak on behalf of DuPage United. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clara, for giving us some insight into DuPage United and how you all are building relationships across differences. Thank you all to our panelists for these talks that you all have given today. I want to, before we take a couple of minutes, our last few minutes here to entertain some questions, I want to let you all know that this effort that we're doing today is a part of a larger effort where RGW is listening in across stakeholders in Glen Ellyn to then provide a report about where the town is and where where we recommend you all go forward. So I definitely want to acknowledge that and let you all know that we will recommend that the report be shared in whatever way is most convenient for the library. So just want to put that out there. And we didn't get as many questions, so it's perfect timing. We got a couple of questions that I think we can entertain. Our first question comes from a representative of the small business community in Glen Ellyn, and they are looking to know, how can small businesses in Glen Ellyn work with any of your organizations to support in the diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice work that you all are doing? And I will put that out there for anyone who wants to answer or has some has a means for folks to get involved.
So maybe I can start on an idea. So first of all, I think that's Emily. Is that right? The question's from Emily. So thank you, Emily, for the question. You know, and there's obviously many different things. We would love to have you join and work on some of the efforts and initiatives that we work on, but specific to small businesses, one of the things one community has considered is actually creating like a portrait, like a picture of a community member and their stories as to how they got here, of the diverse population, and maybe leverage some of the storefronts to be able to do that. And if that's something that, you know, your small business or other small business would be interested in doing and helping us do that, that would be incredible, because, you know, obviously now people aren't walking around that much, but one day when we get to the other side of COVID and people are walking around downtown, that's one way of, you know, kind of bringing the diversity right in front of people's, you know, sphere of, you know, whatever. So that's one quick way, but definitely feel free to reach out. There's, you know, of the different initiatives, there's always different ways to engage, but others probably have other ideas.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll speak for GCRC real quick. We have a few of our annual fundraisers throughout the year, our literary event being the one in the spring, and we often rely on our local businesses to sponsor our events or provide raffle items and things like that. And it's a way for you to show that you support our mission and the work that we're doing in the community, and also a way for us to support you and your business as well. We've had, during COVID especially, we've had a really strong relationship with the bookstore downtown. They provided, they're very quick to help us provide books to build our at-home libraries for our students and things like that. So we are always open to community support and collaboration and connection.
I'll also chime in that I think you've taken the first step, because just being a part of and listening in and learning about the different organizations today, I think there were 60 others or 60 that participated, and that's really the first step, is just learning and listening and becoming aware of what's available. You know, from the WISE perspective, one of the key things that we did this past summer while we were closed down is that we found that families didn't have weekend meals or hot meals during the weekend. So we partnered with local restaurants and grocery stores and businesses to help provide meals to those families. So I think there's just a variety, and because of the diversity of even this panel and the different efforts that we're doing, just being a part today was a big first step. So thank you for listening in.
Thank you, Rob. Anyone else want to add to that?
Well, I would just add, and I ditto, Rob, what you had said about being here and listening to the different efforts that are going on and being open to that. DuPage United is a collective group of organizations. And so all organizations are welcome to be members of DuPage United. Thank you.
I was just gonna throw in like ditto to everybody, but I think too, like thinking of like down the road, like when we're doing common messaging, like that we envision coming from every part of our community, you know, whether it's the grocery store or the barber or the little shops downtown. And so, you know, I think like everyone said, like being aware of these things. And so when that opportunity comes, I think being able to share those things would be really, really helpful in spreading the word.
Okay, so I did want to go ahead and just steer this question. We are at the 3 o'clock mark, but I did get this question at least more than once. So I did want to steer this question actually directly to Deanna. So folks are interested in knowing if you have any advice or support tools around how to mitigate those fears that you mentioned in regards to diverse populations, maybe being afraid of being labeled, if they're to seek mental health assistance or housing or things like that. So just want to ask if you have any advice or tools that people can utilize as they may be experiencing that in their personal work.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that question, whoever proposed it. I think, you know, what we were talking about before, just being very direct right now, right? And, you know, sometimes that does come with fear. If you see a person of color or you see a person in need, you know, don't shy away from it. Now is the time to really confront that stuff head on and be a resource and a source of support in our community. I don't say everything right all the time, right? I'm a white female Caucasian and I work with a lot of diverse clients. And they like to tell me when I'm wrong or when I say something that, you know, is offensive or uneducated. And just going in every day and building that rapport and trust with people, that's so important to our community, especially right now. So be a source of support and do not shy away. And if you need other resources, obviously there are tons of professionals in our community that can help initiate that discussion or move it forward.
Yes. One thing I would add to that question is, you know, just be intentional about explaining to folks your role, right? And what your role is and how your job works. Because, you know, as a Black woman and as someone who has Black women friends who have sought out therapy, they may be parents and they're afraid of, if I go and tell the therapist this, is someone going to try to take my child away from me, right? So just being intentional about explaining your role, as well as, you know, letting people know that you are there to build a relationship of trust and understand who they are, where they come from, and to help, not to hurt. So I do want to end by just letting everyone know that we are compiling, RGW, we are compiling an after action report. So all of the notes in the chat, any questions that may have been asked that we missed, we will take into account in that report. And just want to say thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our participants for taking time out on your Saturday to be here and engage in this very important discussion. There will be some ongoing conversations, and you can learn more about those conversations on the public library's website. I believe we have some on January 26th where we'll be having a strategic conversation with the community and thinking about how we can be strategic about moving forward in this work. We will be having some affinity groups as well, where people can reach out directly to Dawn and become a part of an affinity group that they relate to. And then there is also going to be another event on January 30th. So please be sure to visit the library's website, as well as reach out to Dawn directly for more information. And with that, I just want to wish everyone a good rest of their Saturday and a good rest of your weekend. Thank you all so much. Have a good one.